Hi there, Theories and Skills students. Dr. Brazier here. Let's take a look at what is going on in session 11. So the topics for this week, as usual, there's two. The theory topic is postmodern theories. And then the skills topic is action skills for building resilience and managing stress. This says, in session 11, we will address the important skills of building client resilience and managing stress. These are important skills when clients are faced with life stressors and need to have ways of accessing and developing resilience and coping. And who doesn't need help with that, right? This session will focus on postmodern theory and techniques and how these approaches can be integrated with the Christian faith. What are you reading and what are you watching? In your Ivy and Zalaquette book, you're going to look at Chapter 12, Action Skills for Building Resilience and Managing Stress, Self-Disclosure, Feedback, Logical Consequences, Directives/Instruction, and Psychoeducation. And then in your Corey book, you're doing Chapter 13, Postmodern Approaches. There's also a couple of videos, both by Dr. Fiddler. This one is like 7.5 minutes, and it's about postmodern approaches. So the two that you're going to be looking at is solution-focused brief therapy and narrative therapy. Now, these two approaches are very different from one another. Corey puts them under the umbrella of postmodern approaches because in some way it's a different approach than all of the ones we've seen. There is sort of a deconstruction element. In solution-focused brief therapy, it's like, what difference does it make? The origin of the problem, how it got started. Let's just figure out what works and do more of that. Let's figure out what's not working and do less of that. So it's deconstructing this idea that I have to understand all of this in order. And it's deconstructing the idea that the solution has to be linked to the problem in some sort of logical, understandable way. It doesn't, right? If I come to a counselor because I want to lose weight, and we find that what's working in my life is learning to do pottery, then you would say, well, what in the world does learning to do pottery and taking pottery classes have to do with losing weight? Well, maybe we can't come up with some logical connection. Maybe we can, but it would be, kind of strained at best. But if it works, do more pottery classes. So that's solution-focused brief therapy. As long as it's not harming anybody else. It's not as if any solution is equally usable. There are still limits, right? We don't want to do anything that causes harm to anybody else, but as long as it's not causing harm, if it's working, do more of it. If it's not working, do less of it. And then narrative therapy is deconstructing the idea that the problem lies within the person. It's kind of like family systems, which says the problem isn't within the person, it's within the system. This approach says you can conceptualize the problem as external to the person. And a lot of counselors in training are like, oh, no, because then they aren't taking responsibility for it. If they're saying it's not me, it's the problem, and the problem's out there and I'm not the problem, then they'll never take responsibility. And paradoxically, it tends to be the opposite. When I believe that I'm the problem, I can feel pretty helpless and hopeless because changing me feels hard, or it's a part of my identity, like it's fused with who I am as a person. But when I can externalize the problem and say, no, I'm me, and the problem's here, now all of a sudden I have more power to take action upon the problem, because it's not like I'm taking action against myself, I'm taking action against the problem. And so I can rise up and finally take action. It's very interesting. I love both of these approaches. I find that regardless of whether these end up being your theoretical orientation, there's a lot of very practical, useful stuff. You'll find a lot of solution-focused brief hacks that can help you just be a better counselor, just how you do each session, sort of the template for a session. And narrative therapy, too, the way you conceptualize and talk about the problem, how you are aware of if a client has a problem-saturated narrative, like you can hear it once you know about it. It's fascinating. So I love these two approaches. And then a briefer video, only a little over 3 minutes, talking about these skills. Now, these are a lot of skills that they're sort of lumping together here, right? Self-disclosure, which I find counselors in training walk away still not understanding when to self-disclose, how much to self-disclose. They don't have a framework. So if I haven't shared this with you before, I'm sharing it with you here. If I already shared it, let it just, reinforce what you've already heard from me. But here's how you know when to self-disclose. If before you open up your mouth to say anything about yourself, prior to doing so, if in your own mind you can come up with a specific way in which you believe what you're about to share with this client can be helpful to them, you're free to do it. That's the parameter. Now, you don't need to take 8 years to do it. Take as little time as possible. You know how I am about being succinct. It's not about me. It's not about me as the counselor. This isn't about me. So I don't need to go on a long-winded story in order to help my client. But if I could in my own mind say, this is the reason why I believe this will help this client in this situation, I'm free to do it. And if I can't, then if I can't come up with a specific reason how I believe it will help this particular client with this particular problem in this particular moment, if I can't be specific and come up with it, then I shouldn't do it, because it's probably more about me feeling special or important, or me trying to hotwire connection. A lot of times counselors in training try to hotwire connection with a client instead of doing all the work of using that basic listening skill set, instead of reflecting and summarizing and paraphrasing and showing that you're empathizing, right? Instead of doing all that work to build rapport, maybe I'll just tell them, oh, I had that experience too. And then that'll like hotwire rapport. And I will tell you, it doesn't work. Even if I have the same experience as a client, the way in which my genetics and my early experiences and my later experiences, the cumulative personality of me will experience that same scenario or situation that the client had in some ways differently, because I am not them and they are not me. And so even if we have the exact same experience, which is really rare, like we can have some similarities, there's lots of overlap, but to have the exact same experience is pretty rare. But even if we had the exact same experience, we wouldn't internally experience that experience the same way. And it is very arrogant and short-sighted to assume that it is. So I can't hotwire connection that way. But what if I could say, okay, this client is not only telling me about this experience they had, but they're telling me they feel alone in it because they don't know anybody else who's experienced that. Well, for me to say something very brief like, I had something similar happen to me too. I just want you to know you're not alone. That can be very shame busting. So maybe in my own head, I'm thinking my intention behind self-disclosing is to bust apart the shame that says that they're especially bad or alone in this. Okay. And then I got to play this game of how little can I say that will accomplish that good intention without soaking up lots of time in therapy that this client is sacrificing to be here, that it's supposed to be about them. So that's self-disclosure. The other one I want to talk about is psychoed. People hear psychoed and they get excited because they think, oh, I'm learning all this stuff in my master's program, so much cool stuff. Ooh, I know stuff about the brain. Ooh, I've experienced stuff in my own life and in my own, previous training and everything. I can't wait to impart all my great knowledge to my clients. And because knowledge is power, right? And they're going to know so much and then they're going to be able to do so much. And I find it funny because in this day and age of Google and YouTube and TikTok and everything else, what in the world makes any of us think that our clients couldn't know something if they really wanted to find it out? That's very arrogant to us, for that they say when we assume, right? No. If our clients really wanted to know about something, they could look it up. And somebody who has way more expertise than I have in that particular thing is on the internet somewhere sharing about it. Now, there's also a lot of misinformation out there too, sure. But the reason I say that is not to tell you don't do psychoed. It's to put psychoed into its proper place, which is, first of all, let's not assume that they know nothing about what we want to share, impart our knowledge, right? Instead, inquire first. What do you already know about this? So let's talk about neuroscience, right? If I want my client to understand that every time they're worrying, they're actually building a neural pathway of worry in their brain and they're strengthening it and it's becoming more myelinated, I might be like, ooh, I've got this cool thing to tell them about their brains. But I might want to first ask, what do you know about what worry does to the pathways in your brain? Maybe they already know. Maybe it's not ignorance that's kept them stuck. Maybe it's that they haven't hit on what can help them shift that worrying behavior to something else. So rather than assuming they know nothing, first let's ask, what do you already know about this? And then if we notice that what they know is incorrect or has gaps, then we can come alongside them and fill in those much more succinctly. And they're more willing to listen to us because we're not just telling them stuff that they feel like they've already heard other places. We're actually correcting or filling in. Okay? So first, don't assume that they know nothing. Ask, and then come alongside and work with what they already know to add. Secondly, if needed, maybe it's not even needed. Maybe they know just as much as you know. Secondly, play the game of how succinctly could I convey this information to them? Because we don't tend to have long attention spans. I ramble on in these. You guys maybe your brain turns off in these announcement videos, but our attention spans don't tend to be terribly long. Nobody really loves being lectured at for long periods of time. We all just sort of glaze over. So play this game in your own mind of how can I share this, truly capture the important points, but not go on and on and on. And you will find that the more you practice that skill, the better you'll get. So it's not just about what you know that you can impart through psychoeducation. It's also how good of a psychoeducation provider are you in session. Because it's not everybody wants to be a counseling student. Not everybody geeks out on psychology stuff. And so I don't want to assume that they're just going to hang on my every word that I'm sharing the way that I hung on, when I was learning something super interesting about, psychology. So that was just a couple of things I wanted to share with that. Okay. You've got 2 case stand videos to look at this week. One on narrative therapy and one on solution-focused brief therapy. So you can access those through Mind Tap in session 11. Your FICIP this week is to read John 8, 1 through 11. This says, here in John 8, we see Jesus interacting with a woman caught in adultery. This was a serious moment for this woman. She was on the verge of being brutally executed by the religious leaders of Israel. As you read the story, reflect on how Jesus addresses the stress of this critical moment and how he's able to hold the tension between the religious leaders' realities and then that of the woman, and consider how he's able to address the needs of everyone present. Very interesting curiosity to approach this story with. So I love that. Okay, you're going to do a skill setter this week as usual. Here it is, session 11, action skills for building resilience and managing stress. Please go ahead and do all 3. Practice makes better. So client is considering the possibility of returning to university. Do that one. Client has sought counseling to address stressors she's dealing with. Do that one. But especially focus on the one I think I'll be grading, which is client is considering how to take learned skills into his, quote, real life. Let's take a look at the rubric for this. So there's going to be 2 components that you're going to be graded on. 1, did the response include a reflection of the sense of self-empowerment and agency, autonomy, the client has gained over his life? So you need to explicitly address the client's growth of self-empowerment agency. This says, i.e., it should say e.g., because e.g. means for example, but here are some examples that they give you. Please try to judge it, make it your own, but something to the effect of, you're more aware of and able to make positive decisions for yourself than you had been before you began counseling. Or, I appreciate your work to understand how much more influence you actually have over your life, including the decisions you're able to make toward the things you really want. Something to that effect, something highlighting and celebrating that autonomy. And then the second component to this that you're going to be graded on, did the response include a statement encouraging the client to continue to grow and utilize the skills learned in counseling? So something to the effect of, I'm hoping that you just keep on this great track of gaining more and more autonomy or agency or influence over your own life as you keep on applying the skills that you've learned with me. Something like that. Okay, so you're doing those 2 things in your skill setter for the week. And then, as usual, you have your postmodern inventory, and then you have your session 11 study and practice questions. All right, y'all, that's it for the week. I hope you have a great one. I look forward to hearing from you guys. We'll be at office hours if I can help in any way. Thanks so much. Bye.